This is the Business of Apps podcast, bringing you actionable insights from the leaders of the global app industry and the world's fastest growing apps. You can find more app news, data and analysis over at businessofapps.com.
Welcome to the Business of Apps podcast. On this show, we invite app industry professionals to cover various topics, and we promise to do our best to keep it both insightful but brief. If you haven't subscribed to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or other podcast platforms where you can find us, I strongly encourage you to do that. Once you subscribe, you will be getting episodes of this show on your device as soon as it is available. In this episode, we have Pablo Pérez González, Performance Marketing Director at Admiral Media. Pablo, welcome to the Business of Apps podcast.
Thank you very much. How are you, Art?
I'm doing great. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being on the show. So we're going to set up the stage before we begin. So every change in the app ecosystem, especially when it comes to tools and solutions introduced by Apple or Google, goes through this cycle. First, you get a mixed reaction. Some people are thrilled, some are shaking their heads and rolling out their eyes. Then they learn to adapt to this change. You can complain as much as you want, but you're in a position to cancel it. You need to adjust your workflow to move forward. So back in 2018, Apple released the SKAdNetwork, and ever since it became a hot topic for endless discussions on conferences, chats on Reddit, as well as internal discussions within marketing agencies, app development teams, and so on. Today we have Pablo to update you with what you need to know about SKAN 4.0 this year. But first, Pablo, let's begin with talking about you and your background in tech. Please tell us about yourself.
Well, as you said, I'm the performance director at Admiral Media. I started working, can't even remember when it was exactly. I guess it was around 2011 or so. In the online marketing industry, I started as a campaign manager for web user acquisition in different industries. I have been always working in the client side until I joined Admiral Media, which happened around almost 4 years ago. That was my first agency experience, and I'm really happy that I joined Admiral Media because I have learned a lot since I joined. And I also like to define myself as being data passionate and being as curious as cats. I like to play with almost everything I see new out there in the industry or in platforms I usually use. So yeah, that's me.
All right. So, we had your founder, Andrew Kempe, like a few dozens of episodes back. So please refresh our audience memory about Admiral Media. What services do you guys offer? Do you have admirals on staff?
we don't. We could think about it. But our Andre is actually our admiral, I would say, and that's how we call it internally, in a joke way, I would say. But yeah, I guess I can't even remember when Andre participated in your podcasts, but I guess it has been quite some time ago. And things have changed significantly in Admiral Media. So the core business is still performance marketing, but we do improved a few things internally, like the creative team. We have a very well-established creative team lead for the last or since 1 or 2 years already. Then we have also we improved the reporting and tracking knowledge internally very nicely. We have also a data analyst that's building our reports for the client we work with. And also we introduced App Store optimization for our clients as a new service. So since then, things changed quite significantly, and I would say all of them for good.
It's good to hear that you guys are growing. All right. So it's March 2024. Believe it or not, it's spring. So the SKAD framework was introduced, like I said, at the beginning in 2018. It's been 6 years. So what does the latest 4.0 update bring to the table for app marketers?
Yeah, it's spring, but as a parenthesis, I'm freezing here. I'm in the northwest of Spain, and since the last 2 weeks it has been freezing. But yeah, the winter has been quite warm, or warmer than usual. But going back to SKAN specifically, I don't want you to get bored with the news that we usually or we have been hearing since October 2022. I guess it was released. But the major updates are, yeah, I guess it was like 1 year and a half ago, right?
Late October 2022, the 4.0 version was released.
Yeah, so it's been a while, and we only saw a few postbacks coming from SKAN 4 as we speak. But the major updates are the crowd anonymity, source identifier, multiple postbacks. Now we receive 3 instead of 1, and the along with the possibility of locking the window for each of the postbacks, and the web to app support. But yeah, so we have more granularity in terms of what can be tracked through SKAN 4 compared to the previous version. And that's why we have the 3 postbacks implemented, with each of them with different timeframes. The first one is from 0 days to day 2. The second is from day 3 to day 7. And the third is from day 8 to day 35. So we are able, or we would be able, to track more activity in the user funnel and in the for a longer time frame as well, right?
Yeah.
So that's great news, but we're still not seeing so many version 4 of SKAN postbacks.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's been more than a year and you haven't seen much of a traction for this latest iteration of SKAdNetwork. That's interesting, but I suppose all those updates, all those improvements are welcomed by the industry. But people do make mistakes. That's the nature of every one of us. So when you look at the app marketers and app developers, how they have been using the framework, what common mistakes being made can you see?
Yeah, we all make mistakes. That's a way of learning. Not the best one, I would say, but yeah, I mean, we all been through that, right? But yeah, I have, since SKAN was released, I have seen so many people reducing iOS investment in terms of user acquisition budgeting, or just pausing completely the user acquisition on iOS devices because they didn't know how SKAN worked, right? So that's definitely something I don't recommend, because if you prove that those users were working for you before, meaning that they were converting into revenue, then why not still acquiring iOS users, right? Or another thing I saw quite often is moving some budget from regular iOS 14.5 devices or SKAN campaigns to Apple Chats or Android, right? Again, same logic. Why doing so if the data proves that those users were valuable for you before? Then some other errors that I have seen are not checking conversion value null rates frequently enough. For example, the higher the percentage of the conversion value null rates you're getting, the less visibility you have in the user activity after they install the app, right? So you only get the install, and you don't see what they are doing, even in the time frame that SKAdNetwork tracks user activity, right? Then not merging campaigns or having campaigns separately, many campaigns. Like, of course, before SKAN 4 in Meta, for example, you were able to launch 9 campaigns. In TikTok, there were only 11. Now they increased it from 9 to 18 in Meta, for example, a few months ago. But if you have so many campaigns, remember that the crowd anonymity or the privacy threshold are on campaign level, right? So if you have so many campaigns, then you will need to have big budget on each of them. So on the opposite side, if you merge campaigns, yes, you will have less granularity in terms of postbacks you will be receiving, but you will have more in-app activity or in-app events being reported, because you will be reaching the campaign threshold more easily with less budget. Also relying heavily on lookalike audiences. Remember that when we reduced, or the IDFA got removed, then the ad networks struggled to identify those users who opted out, right? They are not able to do so. So the base audience to create the lookalike audiences are way smaller compared to before if you're relying on in-app activities. Those are the ones that...
You mentioned crowd anonymity concept. I'm not sure if like every listener familiar with this concept. Can you give us a brief explanation of how does it work?
Yeah, so they introduced 4 tiers of crowd anonymity, tier 0, 1, 2, or 3. And you will get different information in the postbacks. For example, the in-app events, how many postbacks you will get. If you are on tier 0, you will get only for only the install, no conversion value or anything. The more installs you get, the higher the crowd anonymity or the tier you will be falling into, and the more data you will get, right? If you, for example, overcome the specific threshold, which we don't know which ones they are still, you will get the first postback as a fine-grained value, and the second and third postback as coarse-grained value. But for example, if you don't, then you will get only the first postback as a coarse-grained value, right? What's more, in addition, if you are on tier 3 or tier 4, you will also get different breakdowns or the 2 additional digits for the source identifier. That's something that also changed from SKAN 3 to SKAN 4. Before we were having campaign ID only, which consisted of 2 digits, and which the ad networks were using mostly for campaign ID and also some internal data analysis, which of course we don't have visibility of. And now with the source identifier, we have 4 digits, right? So if you fall into tier 2 or tier 3 or tier 4, tier 2 or tier 3, I guess you will also receive the 2 last digits of the source identifier.
Yeah, so this is pretty smart framework, how you can actually obscure the personal information about the app users when you're getting just a few of them, and when you have a quote-unquote crowd, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of app downloads, you can get more information because that volume, there's no way you can identify specific users in this big crowd of app downloads. Let's talk about how you guys approach about the implementing SKAdNetwork when you run campaigns for clients.
Yeah, we have a quite interesting framework which consists of 7 steps, and we try to cover all of them before actually coming with an idea of how to map the conversion values. And it could be applicable for SKAN 3 in the unique postback we are getting, or it can be also used for SKAN 4 in the 3 postbacks we are getting, right? So the first step would be to understand what's the main goal for performance, to measure performance, right? Are we interested in subscriptions or in ROAS or in in-app purchases or trials started, for example, right? The second step would be to understand the user funnel, right? So we will usually write down what the events that we are tracking that reflect the user funnel, basically, right? So it could be install, onboarding completed, or install, sign up, onboarding completed, trial started, trial converted, trial renewed, renewal, and so on, right? Then we think if we will be using all those events, or all those events can be used for SKAN either optimization or reporting, because I might not be interested in signups, for example, right, for campaign optimization or campaign reporting, because I don't consider that event as super valuable, because 99% of the users that install the app are converting into signup. So, for example, we can skip that one, right? So you make a decision of, or a list of which events that you are tracking can be used for, or you will be using for campaign optimization or reporting. The next step would be the event prioritization for the events that you chose in the previous step, right? So, and this is linked to the main goal that you're following as a business and as to measure performance. The deeper in the funnel the goal is, for example, ROAS, or you have a subscription goal, cost per subscription goal, or cost per purchase goal, then those events will have higher priority compared to the others. But I have seen some clients that are keen on a specific cost per trial because they have their own model that they know if I get a cost per trial of 10 euros, then I'm profitable, right? Because they expect a conversion rate of whatever from trial to subscription or trial converted. And they know they are keen on the cost per trial specifically. So the trial event will have higher priority over the subscription event or the trial converted event, for example, in that case, right? And the next one, so I covered 4 steps now. The 5th would be the understanding how often or what's the percentage of the event count or revenue that's being triggered in each postback. For example, we know that trial started is usually triggering on the first postback, mostly on day 0, day 1, day 2, right? And probably less than 10% is triggering on the postback 2 and even less than that on postback 3, right? But for example, if you have a 7-day free trial, the trial conversion or the subscription itself is happening from day 7 onwards, right? Mostly on day 7, 8, and 9, because most of the trial starts happen on day 0, 1, and 2, right? So you know that trial converted or subscription itself won't be able, or you won't consider them in the first postback because they are not happening, right? Then the next one would be to understand if you have enough SKAN network conversions attributed to your campaigns, right? Remember that the ad networks for the algorithms usually need around 50 to 100 conversions per week attributed to a specific campaign for the algorithm to have enough signals to be efficient, right? So of course, if you're launching the SKAN network from scratch, you might not have enough information for the postback 2 and postback 3, of course, because you're running it from scratch. But you could use what you have from SKAN 3, for example, to understand if at least in the first postback you will receive or the campaigns will get attributed enough conversions on the specific event you want to optimize for, right? If not, for example, if you want to optimize for trial converted, but you get only 10 or trials even, but you only get 10 weekly conversions attributed to the specific campaign, then you will need to go upper in the funnel to give the algorithm more signals, right? It might sound complicated, but believe me, it's not that complicated.
Yeah.
And once you get your hands dirty into the topic, then things will come up more easily. And the last one would be to analyze if you are going to use the log window feature or not, right? So remember that the log window feature can be attached to the high conversion value. So basically, it could trigger whenever the event that you mapped as high conversion value triggers, or you could trigger it to a specific hour or time, right? For example, after 72 hours elapsed or after 180 hours consumed since the install happened, right? So those are the 7 steps that we usually follow. Once we have everything done, the next step would be to come up with ideas on how we map each conversion value for each of the postbacks.
Got it. So that's the whole framework. Yeah, it's pretty elaborate and comprehensive. Now, coincidentally, at the end of 2022, not only SKAdNetwork 4.0 was introduced but ChatGPT was introduced to the audience. So it's been more than a year as well, and we all know like how shockingly it was for people who did not follow the development in the generative AI, which is the majority of us, a very narrow band of specialists who are in the know, and they saw that it's coming. Everybody else did not see it was coming. So here we go. It's more than a year, and obviously we try to apply it as the tool to anything we do, trying to solve the problems we've been having on our hands, and we couldn't resolve with anything else. We're trying to answer this question: does generative AI help me with this problem or not? Can it improve, streamline my workflow or not? So what do you think? Can generative AI be helpful to work with SKAdNetwork at all, like in any way?
I mean, that's a good question. I I've been using generative AI in a few ways. The easiest answer would be it's helpful for conversion value mapping, right? But my experience says it's not there, or it's not at the level I would expect yet. So I think that someone knowledgeable on the topic will do the conversion value mapping better than ChatGPT, for example, or any other generative AI tool that you can find out there. However, it could, if you don't know anything about the topic, it could help you come up with some solutions which might not be ideal, but in that sense, it could be useful. But I think it somewhere in the near future, I would say in the next 12 months, for example, it could get, or it could improve enough to get closer or close to the human's mind, for example, right? Remember that, yeah, SKAN 4.0 is already, I wouldn't say old, but it's grown enough, 1.5 years. But there's no real data, right? So the tools, AI tools, need some data to be fed from. Another, yeah, the other things that could potentially help with are, for example, helping with identifying anomalies or data issues, right? So, for example, if you analyze SKAN data, SKAN 4.0 or SKAN 3.0 data, you could potentially identify app bugs, for example, right? Because users might not be able to do start trial because there's an app bug from the last release you did. Or it could also help with identifying changes in the user behavior, right? So, for example, users might be converting on the first day onto trial, then now they're converting on day, I don't know, 3 or 4, for example, right? And of course, if you made changes in the conversion value mapping, it could help you identifying some errors, or for example, conversion values that are not being triggered at all in the fine-grained value, right? So those things, I think generative AI could be helpful with.
So right now, if you still, you should still rely more on a human being. If you have that specialist in your team, you can tap this knowledge and experience. But as more information will be fed into the system, as algorithm obviously every week being improved internally in the beta version, in the teams of Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, and others. So yeah, we should see that it's coming. Let's say next summer, the conversation will be different, and the value of ChatGPT as the quote unquote part of your team, your employee, which you don't need the water cooler for. The value will be greater, and the analytical capability to help you with finding the patterns you've just laid out will be greater. Now, if you can write a wish list for Apple's team,
I
that is
know why you're laughing now.
yeah,
I wish I
yeah.
could.
So what would be on that list? Like, uh, assuming you cannot cancel the thing, but you have to improve it. So what would you improve?
I wish they listen to us, to the industry. Someday they will, maybe, I don't know. That's a good question, and I guess some of us will ask. I mean, industry people will ask different things, right? So I have a long list of things that could be improved in SKAN framework. For example, I won't cover all of them because we'll be in the
Okay,
full day.
just
But
a few that is kind of nagging for you. Okay.
yeah, so less limitation in regards of the data we receive, for example. Let's assume that for a specific campaign, we're reaching the privacy threshold or the crowd anonymity that they want or enforces. Then why can't we have enough or the same granularity that we were having before, right? I mean, why can't we get the same user activity we were receiving before SKAN, right? I mean, if I can't already identify the user anymore because I reached the privacy threshold,
Right.
why are you locking the activity of the user? I want to know what the user did in my app, right?
Makes
um,
sense.
yeah, it's the same thing for the different breakdowns like ad group, country, ad level data, and other breakdowns. they could potentially create a specific or another separate number for the privacy threshold for each of the breakdowns. But if I reach that, then give me the information, right? Don't block anything. Just give it to us. It's useful for us. And then, of course, the usual one when you compare SKAdNetwork to Privacy Sandbox, they opened. I mean, the latter opened the communication channels with the developers and marketers. They created a testing environment which didn't exist when SKAN was released, right? So that's also, from now onwards, I guess they should take care about it.
So I hope it's just a matter of time. It's not like a philosophical objection. They do want to provide this information. It's just a matter of prioritizing what should go first, what should go next, which features are 100% ready to be rolled out and we have them in the 4.0 version, and which will be in the next version. So I do hope it's on their map, on their list to release this year, presumably this coming fall or sooner. Now, here comes this question for you, Pablo. So looking at the app industry as a whole, like apart from SKAN, what would you like to change about it the most? Like the whole app industry, if you can
That's a
think
hard
of
one.
anything.
Yeah. I mean, continuing on paid ads, because that's my expertise, right? I would say algorithms transparency. I'm really unhappy with the data we could see, and especially on Google, it's a black box. Google Ads, I mean, it's a black box, and we don't have things really to play with. The app campaigns are just one campaign. You can create several ad groups. You can put several credits in each ad group, but you can't really decide on your end which audience you will be targeting, which demographics you will be targeting, except for country. Then that's really annoying from my perspective. And Meta and TikTok they seem to be following the same or going to the same direction with their automated campaign types and placements. So that's on paid ads. And for example, on app stores, I think the store's A/B testing structure can be improved. They're quite limited currently. For example, in the App Store Connect, it's not possible to run tests on several languages at the same time if you want to get data separately for each market, for example, right? And then, of course, we can be discussing on the fees structure, long hours. They are not favoring small businesses to come into the game, but it is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's March, and it's the month where the Digital Markets Act in Europe begins to be in full swing. Apple should comply. We see the release of iOS 17.4, which has mostly there are several features in this release, but the big one for Europe will be the changes that are being introduced to comply with this Digital Markets Act for Europeans. Remains to be seen how things will play out. Apple were gradually brought to this realization that they need to open up the App Store for Europe in Europe. But we all know that we're living in a very connected world. The changes that have been introduced in the European region, quite frankly, when it's about the internet, cannot be located only there. In most cases, like with GDPR, regulations introduced there, kind of spilled over to North America and all over the world. We'll see how things will be playing out in terms of the closeness, the paradigm of the App Store in the US, because it's still being intact. It's only it was only open up for Europeans. We'll see how it will change. Will it be changed in the similar fashion in the near future or not?
Looking forward to the change and what the impacts are.
Fingers crossed. So this is the first part of the show, and we're transitioning to the quick, funny second one, where every time I have a new guest on the show, I have just a few quick questions so I can kind of introduce better my guests to the audience and they can know that individual better. Here we go. What smartphone do you have now? Are you in the Android or iOS camp? Have you been switching between these two camps or being one side all the time?
No, so I'm 30, almost 33, right? So iPhones or Apple devices weren't that popular when I was young. So I started with Android devices a long time ago, and I made one switch. It was around 7, 8 years ago that when I switched to iPhone, I guess. So I stick to it since then.
Okay, if we can jump even a little bit backwards before the first smartphone, what was your first mobile phone? Like the one you could stick in your pocket, could be carrying with you?
Oh, let me think. I guess it was the one with the lid. It was Motorola V3 or something like that. It was a silver with the lid. It was quite popular back then. And I can't even remember when it was, but probably 2012 or something.
Yeah, so that's yeah, if like when people try to recollect their first mobile phone, like the list of brands goes through Nokia, Motorola, probably
Yes.
Sony, but very rarely Sony, like either Motorola or Nokia back then. All right, the back to present. So imagine you're out of your home, but for whatever reason you left your smartphone at home. When you're out, what is the most missing feature for you at that point?
I must admit I'm not a heavy mobile phone user. I'm not depending on the mobile phone, luckily. Um, but the two apps I use the most are Slack and WhatsApp, most likely, so messaging apps. And I wouldn't miss them, to be honest. Maybe I would miss Google Calendar and the timer. And those are the two ones I usually also play with for reminder purposes. So the calendar became my best friend long years ago, and I also use the timer feature of the phone pretty often. Hmm.
Got you. All right. Is there anything hardware, software wise, in your smartphone right now which you would like to either improve or any feature that is lacking right now? Not necessarily something bigger and brighter, but some feature that probably make that device a better tool for you.
That's a good one. Mhm. Maybe like the thing is that you have everything in the iPhone, right? Or in the phone itself, so it's hard to think about something. Um, the capability of transporting me somewhere, which will be very difficult in such small device.
Yeah, that would be awesome. But yeah, I think the energy required is too great to squeeze it into
Yeah,
this device. But that would be great. Yeah. The next transition after the Google Maps or Apple Maps, not only show me the route, but get me there.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That's a good
Yeah.
starting point, I guess.
Yeah. Teleportation through your smartphone. Star Trek in real life. All right. Before I let you go, very, very final question. How can people get in touch with you and get more information about what you do?
They can reach out to me via LinkedIn. You can find me pretty easily, I guess. Pablo Pérez González, working at Admiral Media. Or they can also write to me in. You can find me in our admiral.media to find what we are doing at the agency as well.
Great. Pablo, thank you so much for spending time with us and being on the show. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks to you, Art.
My pleasure. And that was Pablo Pérez González, Performance Marketing Director at Admiral Media. To listen to more episodes, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. Just search for Business of Apps and you will find us easily. Remember, we release episodes on Mondays, so subscribe and you will be getting new episodes of this show on your smartphone, tablet, or computer as soon as we release them. And please don't forget to leave us a review or comment on iTunes. It is highly appreciated. And all episodes will also be available on businessofapps.com. Thank you for listening. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Business of Apps podcast. For more, head on over to businessofapps.com.